Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Nice that you're here. So today we are going to talk, or you are going to talk, and Thomas Mensink is going to talk about the topic where many people think entrepreneurship is all about, namely show me the money, what's the value, what can you make, how much do you have to give for something, what do you get back, that type of things. Of course, it's not the only thing in entrepreneurship, you already know that, and you have shown that in the earlier versions of evenings with your questions about many topics. So, but at the same time, I do think that the money thing and the value of a company is very important. And Thomas Mensink is actually an expert on that. He studied at a great university. I hate to say that here, but in my other workplace I say it with much pleasure, so actually here too. Him is at the University of Twente, and he studied, I think you did your master thesis also in my group, or?
I did financial engineering.
Financial engineering, yeah. Okay, no, that's not exactly in my group, yeah. So it could have been better, but anyway. No, so Thomas is part of the Golden Egg Check group, and he will actually introduce to you. His interest is very much in looking how startup and venture capital community can be brought together. And venture capital, you can take that in a very broad sense, but also in the traditional sense of how do you get a lot of money to develop your company faster and better. But if you want to have a lot of money, then obviously those persons who give it to you also want something from you. And this sort of exchange is part of what Thomas will be discussing with you. If you will also talking that from the Golden Egg Check, so there's a software package which we also use in the Venture Lab, and it's much about teaching also these days. So, but you will go into the investor readiness actually. So, yeah, please take it away.
Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I understood that it's an extracurricular course, so thank you very much for showing your interest in this topic. So as Art introduced, my name is Thomas Mensink. I'm with the Golden Egg Check, and we are also kind of a startup company, but we go back already, I think, 9 years or so, when we started as more or less consultants for the startup community and also for technology companies to assist them with market research, market analysis, and also the preparations for an investor. So we started looking at where are investors looking at, and how can we use their knowledge to help entrepreneurs. Today I will be talking about investor readiness. So when is your company ready to attract an investor? And also startup valuation. So if you go to an investor, how much is your company actually worth? And this is actually a very hard thing about startups, because it's very hard to determine a value if there's so much uncertainty and so little track record. So I will teach you some tips and tricks about this, and hopefully you can apply them later on, because I have also prepared a case study which I will introduce later, where we can apply the techniques that I'm going to teach you, and then let's see how you will manage that. If you do have any questions, then just ask, because I really like if there's some kind of interaction, and otherwise I'll be here after the case study and the workshop as well. So if you have any questions, then just ask, or tweet me or email me or whatever. So as I said, I'll start with just a couple of backgrounds about my company, Golden Egg Check. Then I'll zoom in on the investor readiness part. So what criteria do investors use? When are you investor ready? And we will apply these criteria to a pitch that I stole from Shark Tank, the US version of, let's say, Dragon's Den, where investors pitch in front of a panel of investors, and today you are the investor. So let's see how that works out. In the second part, so we have a short coffee break. In the second part, I'll discuss startup valuation, just some principles, some methods, and some techniques, and also the weaknesses, because as I said, it's very, very hard to come to a value for a company, and there's maybe no one value. It's more about the assumptions that go in instead of the outcome that comes out of the process. And the case study is well, actually, I think a combination of the two. So first, just a little bit about the golden egg check, because Art already said some things. But this is, let's say, the typical entrepreneur that we came across, let's say 9 or so years ago. So he fell in love with his own solution. He thought that this product was great. His technology was supersonic. The markets there were like $1 billion markets, and he needed an investor, preferably tomorrow, at a valuation of, let's say, 5 million euros or so, without any, let's say, base of stating that. So we thought maybe it's a good idea if we just going to talk to investors and see what they find important, what criteria they use to assess venture propositions or business plans. And let's see which criteria are most important, and let's give these criteria back to entrepreneurs as some kind of a mirror, so that they can determine how well they score on each of these criteria, and to see if they hit any of the knockout criteria, because in that case it doesn't really make sense to talk to an investor. So if you combine that with the, let's say, the uncertainty in which a lot of entrepreneurs are, then you know that it's actually quite hard to first of all start a company and find something that really adds value to a customer, and so that's the first thing. And the second thing is also to seduce an investor to actually give some of his money to you and help your company grow. So it's actually like a very chaotic picture right here. And maybe I was wondering, who of you are already entrepreneurs? Can you show hands if you are an entrepreneur already? So you are? It's just you actually? So you started like a student company, or?
No, I have a barbershop in Germany together with my father.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. And the rest, are you, let's say, thinking about starting your company within maybe 1 year? Or within 5 years? Or 10 years? Or somewhere in your career? So, who did not raise his hand yet?
Close.
So there are some people who don't want to start a company, is that correct?
Well, I didn't know we had to raise our hands.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, who wants to start a company somewhere in their career? Please raise your hands. Okay, this is good. This is better. Okay, and another question, is somebody already investing, for example, with crowdfunding or so? So you are? What kind of crowdfunding platforms do you use?
Kickstarter and Indiegogo.
Okay, yeah. So that's more the pledge crowdfunding, right? Where you give some money and you get the product in return some months later.
Some services.
Yeah, okay. Because in the Netherlands there's also Symbit, which is an equity crowdfunding platform. Have you heard of Symbit? Okay, you can invest money and get shares in return. So then you are really like an investor who wants to go for the upside potential of the company, which can be very interesting, but there are also a lot of risks attached. Is there anyone in this room planning to become an investor later on in his career? Maybe. So there's some. Okay. So interestingly, there are some people who want to start a company, and there are some people who want to be an investor later on. And perhaps there are also people who first want to start a company and then become an investor. And that's actually something that you see quite a lot, because a lot of venture capital investors mainly are prior entrepreneurs. So they have a track record as an entrepreneur, and they still use that knowledge and their networks as an investor or as a venture capital investor or informal investor. So I think there are two sides of the table. You have the entrepreneur side and the investor side. And today we're going to discuss the investor side and use the knowledge to use it in the entrepreneurial side. Does that make any sense? And as a Golden Egg Check, we do that. We try to show entrepreneurs the criteria of venture capital investors, so that they can assess their business case, their potential, their feasibility, and their investor readiness, which is basically a theoretical model. So first of all, we go to investors and ask what criteria they use and what their investment strategies are. For example, how many capital they like to invest per company, or in which regions they invest, in which type of companies they invest. So we all collect that kind of data, and then if you are an entrepreneur and you are within the investment range of an investor, then we add these criteria to your checklist, basically. And you get results like this spider web, where you, in this case, there are two checkers. They both assess the business case on the criteria of the Golden Egg Check and came with an assessment which is fairly similar, but in some clusters it's different, right? So then you have a starting point for discussion. So where are let's discuss the assumptions that we use to come to this assessment. So first, let me start with investor readiness, and I'll start also with the research that I did with the group of Art in Twente, Nikos. My research question back then, I think we're talking about like 5 years ago or so, was about what criteria do venture capital investors use when they assess venture propositions, and how important are these criteria? So I went to a lot of VCs in the Netherlands, but also in Singapore and Sweden, to see if I could get some comparable or very different results. And what we found also based on previous literature was that there are 4 types of criteria mainly. So it's about the team, it's about the product, it's about the market, and it's about financial. So these were like the main categories that we divided all the criteria. And at the end, I think we got a list of maybe more than 80 criteria related to the assessment of venture propositions. So there are quite a lot actually, but you could see very clearly that some were very important. For example, the team is very important, and scalability is very important, and some were not so important. For example, there was one investor in Singapore who said, I always invest, let's say, not with the wave, but against the tide. So if everyone is going that direction, I will go to that direction. And it's a very reasonable investment strategy, but he was the only one. So I didn't include that in the criteria in our final list. The results were that the entrepreneurial team was overall the most important criterion. And it makes sense, right? So a lot of people say it's about the team, it's about in the Dutch, the vent and dansen tent. So the team is very important, and I think that makes sense. But on an individual level, I mean, team is very broad. On an individual level, we saw that there were some product and market-related criteria that were even more important. And these criteria also formed the basis of our Golden Egg Check. And by the way, if you are interested in the Golden Egg Check software, you can just create an account for free. So you can also assess your own business idea if you already have one, or your future ideas if you become an entrepreneur in the future. And these are the results, let's say the main results. So these are the most important criteria according to the investors on a 5-point scale. So in the Netherlands, they said a scalable revenue model is most important. And scalable revenue model means that you are not limited to the hours that you can put in as an entrepreneur, but you have created something that also gives you money when you're sleeping, for example, right? So also in Dutch you have the uurtje factuurtje, so you get paid by the hour. That's not a typical scalable revenue model. Also, scalable technology is very important, and these two are very related. As a matter of fact, in the next version of the Golden Egg Check, we just took the two together. But scalable technology says something about, will you create custom-made solution for every new client, or will you focus on one product that serves all the clients that you wish to address? So in that case, you are developing a scalable technology. Can you demonstrate a market demand? Also very important. You have to show some traction. So are there any, do you have any customers? Do you already make some revenue? Is the revenue, for example, is it repeatable, or is it just a one-time revenue? So there's also quality in revenue difference. Also, the target market has a large growth potential, and you have to understand that venture capital investors, when they invest, they want their money back times 10 or times 20 even. So they have a very high risk return profile. They don't want to invest in companies that grow, let's say, slowly but steadily. They want to invest in the companies that have the potential to become huge, but there's also a certain risk attached to, of course, that they are going to become huge. But if the target market has a large growth potential, then that already helps in getting to the target of hitting a 10 times or 20 times return on investment. The final one in this top 5 is people will pay for the product with a 4.6 on a 5-point scale. So this has something to do with the value proposition. As an entrepreneur, if you have a very nice product but nobody is willing to pay for it, then obviously your product doesn't have so much value for the customer. And you see that also with, let's say, the advertisement model. If you have something, but the people who you are delivering value to don't pay for it, but there's like a third party which sells, where you sell the advertisement to. If that's like a model where the value is more for the advertisers instead of the customers, right? So people pay for the product. There has to be one group that pays for it, otherwise you don't add so many value to your customers. I will skip about Singapore and Sweden. I think we'll come back to that later. But are there any questions so far about the criteria?
Do you have a list of like the least important ones?
I do. Not sure if they're in this presentation though. They don't? They're not. But I think I don't remember. But there were some criteria that were let's say addressed by one or two of the venture capital investors that I spoke to. Let's say the one about if everyone goes that way, I'll go that way. That's one of the criteria that is in the least the bottom 5. I don't recall the other ones actually. What I do have is, let's say if you don't have a scalable revenue model, how many investors would still be interested in that? And that's the next slide. That's this one. So assume that you have an audience of 100 people, and as an entrepreneur you're starting your pitch, and at a certain point you say, I don't have a scalable revenue model. Then you will see that in the Netherlands 83% of the investors will just walk out of the room. That's more or less how you should interpret this table. So for example, if you cannot demonstrate a market demand yet, then 75% of the investors will be knocked out, so they're not interested anymore, regardless of how interesting the rest of the proposition is. And does anything interesting, do you see any interesting things here, maybe?
Scalability.
Why is it interesting?
Oh, why?
I was actually aiming at something else.
It's easy to invest in Sweden, or to
Exactly.
go to Sweden with your company, because investors won't walk out easy.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point that I wanted to make. For some reason, the investors in Sweden have a lower rejection rate. So if you don't have a scalable revenue model yet, then instead of 83%, only 22% of the investors will leave. So that's quite interesting, and I'm not really sure why the differences are so big. As a matter of fact, I wanted to include Sweden in my research because I thought the two markets were more or less the same. So I had a larger sample size, but when I got these results, I wasn't really sure about how to explain this. But I think it has to do with the supply and demand of capital.
Is the data set the same?
Sorry?
The data set is the same as in the Netherlands, like the amount of investors you asked?
Yeah, more or less, yeah, more or less. So it's not based on coincidence or so, maybe a little bit, but I think the main reason is the supply and demand of capital. So I think in Sweden there was an oversupply of capital, and there were too little interesting startups to invest in. So they were willing to invest, to be less critical, let's say. So they were willing to invest even if the revenue model wasn't scalable yet. And maybe that's also because they wanted to help the entrepreneur in an earlier stage to come to a scalable research model later on. Yes?
So this is of course, it's time dependent, but how time dependent, how quickly does it change?
We're not sure yet, but I think in the next month or maybe in 2 months, we will present the follow-on research. And I think that it's hard to say, but because the market is changing quite rapidly, I think. Because in the Netherlands you see that there are a lot of new investors entering the market in an early phase. So also based on what the government is trying to do with the seed capital arrangement, there's as an early stage investor, it's quite easy to get a fund of, let's say, 8 million euros. So in the Netherlands, right now there are a lot of funds in the 8 million with an 8 million euro size. So I think there's competition again in the early phase, and there are not so many investors in the later stage, in the scale-up stage. So probably what I think now is that in an early phase you will see, let's say, the rejection rates of Sweden, where they are willing to invest even if 1 or 2 criteria are not really fully in place yet. But in the later stage you will see more, let's say, the Netherlands model here, where they are really critical and very picky about which company they want to invest in. You have a question?
You only mentioned the point of the criteria that the management team should be pretty decent. How do you assess them? Do you look for personal characteristics or?
Yeah, so in the new version of the Golden Egg Check we have 6 criteria about the team. So 3 about, let's say, the team, and 3 about the execution of the team. And 1 is, for example, track record. So investors find it very important or value it very high if you have already had a startup before. If you have experience in raising money, growing the company, maybe selling the company. If you have been such a cycle once, then they assume that it's easier for you to do it the second time. You've learned some things on the way. So a track record or experience is very important, but also a diverse team. So if you are, for example, if you are a software company and you only have software engineers, then you don't have a diverse team. You have, let's say, the same skill set and the same competencies. And they really want to see a team where there's a CTO, a CEO, and maybe some other person for example, design or whatever, depending on the company, of course. But they prefer to see, let's say, a different, diverse team. I have one more slide about the criteria before we are going to actually apply them. This is if you combine 2 criteria. So if you don't have a scalable revenue model and you cannot demonstrate a market demand yet, then all of the investors are gone. Which implies that maybe it's not the right time to go to a venture capital investor. So maybe you still have the potential to become a great company, but it's not worth your time to go and talk to a venture capital investor then. And here you still see the difference with Sweden, where it's where you still have a chance of getting in touch with an investor. So if you cannot make it here, then just go to Sweden. But I'm not sure how it is at this moment in time. So I'll share our findings with you in 2 months or so. So are there any questions on the criteria? Yeah, you?
You said that there are 2 criteria. If you don't have them, then you cannot go to venture capitalist. So who do you go to? I mean, must be some angel capitalists or something. Because, for example, us, we don't really have anything yet. We have an idea, but we haven't been able to scale it or have a demand or prove that there's a demand in the market. So who do you go to?
I think it also depends on the type of company that you have. But if let's say you have the ambition to have a company which has the potential to become a scale-up, right? So you want to have a company that's going to change the world or to become a market leader, or right? If you do you have such an ambition?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a good starting point, because I think that offers already some investors, because many investors are not interested in the companies that grow slowly but steadily. So I think there's a distinction. If you have certainties and let's say a known business model, then there's one group of investors, and if you have a lot of uncertainties, so a lot of risk, but also a high potential, then you have another group of investors. I'll come back to that later. If you have, for example, if you're a university spin-off, so if you use technology or knowledge from university, then I think you are also in an advantage, because I see a lot of funding from the government goes to spin-off companies. For example, from technical guys that start their company based on their PhD research, for example. And I think that's a very interesting group for the government also to invest in. So if are you that type of company?
I wouldn't say it's for a PhD project, but in summary, we are trying to come up with a new technology for a bike tracking device. And so we have the team for it, but we're trying to get money from investors. So right now we're thinking of going to manufacturers, so bike manufacturers, and asking them to invest in us and then give them sole right of our technology. And that's one way of thinking about it, but another way is if you want to target the customers, so end consumers, then you would need money from somewhere else, I think.
Yeah, it's often it's a chicken and egg problem, right? So if you already have something in place, then it's easier to get to customers, to get revenue, then it's easier to get to investors, etc., etc. But how do you get there? And that's very difficult, I think. I do think that if you are, let's say, if you don't have a scalable revenue model yet, or let's say proven business model or whatever, you cannot demonstrate a market demand yet, then you're very early. So maybe you're.
Would it be enough because we did a market research? Would it be enough to give them the results of the market research?
I think that's a good starting point, but it depends on the results of the market research. If you've talked to customers already and they said, if this gets on the market, I'll be interested to buy it, then that's already some kind of proof. Let's say revenue is the most important proof, but until then, a letter of intent or something like that is the second best.
And what is a letter of intent?
So if a customer says, when you have this product finished, I'll buy it from you. And that's obviously great, and that's more or less also what the Kickstarters are doing. So you give them money already, and if you finish the product, then you actually ship the product to them. But depending on your company, and it's with investors, it's a very tricky game, because if you have too many risks in your company, investors want to see a higher potential return. So sometimes they want a higher stake in your company. So for example, you have to give away maybe 40% of your shares. And that's not something you really want, because if you have a follow-on investor, then he also wants some of the shares. And then in 2 rounds, you have already lost the majority of your shares, and with all implications. So I would suggest in the first phase, if you score very low on investor readiness, then maybe it's better to focus on customers, subsidies, and maybe small seed loans, or maybe, I'm not sure what you have in Groningen here, but in Twente we have a pre-seed fund where you can loan up to, I think, 40,000 euros, and you can also get a business coach and everything. And if you cannot repay the loan, then there's some arrangement that they'll erase the debt or anything. So I think if you don't score well enough on these criteria, maybe it's better to not focus on an angel investor or a venture capital investor, because he wants to have a large stake in your company to equal out the risk that he's taking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
But obviously it's very depending on the type of company and the progress that you've been making, and etc. So let's see how well you do as an investor. Who of you knows the Shark Tank series? Okay, so quite a lot. So I think they're on television, right? Or they were on television, and I think it's very. It's not only fun to watch, but it's also you learn a lot from it, because there are seasoned investors. They assess each pitcher, and you learn a lot by how they assess and what criteria they use, and what their let's say their evaluation is of the company, and also the negotiations to get to evaluation. It's very interesting. At the same time, it's very interesting to learn about the entrepreneurs, how they are pitching, how they are presenting their companies. It's America, so they're also bragging a lot, and it's also very interesting to see how they do that. Let's see for now. So I have one pitch. It's from the Eco Mower. No, it's not. It's a unicycle. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you've seen it in the streets. So let's watch at the pitch first. Let's assess the proposition of the unicycle. We'll use some of the golden egg check criteria to do so. And let's discuss who wants to invest in and why. Is it clear? I hope that the audio works and you can hear it well enough, but let's try.
Next up are Daniel Wood and David Marchinsky with an innovation for personal transportation.
Hey Sharks, I'm Daniel Wood.
And I'm David Marchinsky, and our product is the first and only electric self-balancing unicycle, or SBU for short. We are asking for $300,000 in exchange for 10% equity in our company.
So how does it work? Basically, there's 3 rate gyros, 3 accelerometers, a powerful 32-bit processor running PID loops, fuzzy logic, and Kalman filters, calculating the exact angle of the SBU. The motor's been driven forward and backward in a locked NA-phase PWM configuration.
Keep going, keep going. Don't worry, Sharks. I speak nerd, and I can provide the translation. What Daniel's trying to say here is that the SBU has some really smart sensors inside of it, similar to the Segway, that will always keep you balanced. Why don't you show my work, Dan? The hardest part of a regular unicycle is the pedaling to keep you balanced, but you don't have to worry about that at all with the SBU. It does all that for you with no pedaling. The SBU's motion is intuitive to your movements, making riding feel easy and second nature. It is so portable, you can put it underneath your desk at work. And because it's hands-free, if you're like Daniel, you can program a TI-85 graphing calculator. What a nerd.
We do have the most advanced e-bike controller on the market in here. I designed the circuit board. I've embedded a lot of technology that's very proprietary to us.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
But do you have patents?
We have patents filed, yes.
Filed.
We're already talking with e-bike manufacturers who want to license this technology from us. In fact, we've already licensed it to one other company. We're receiving royalties on that right now.
And you've been selling them for how long?
We just finished tooling up our factory overseas. First 100 units are finishing up this week, and we've already sold all of them.
What was your cost?
$350 for this first run.
And you sold the first 100 at $1,800. Yeah, just off our way.
Okay, so that's the pitch. So let's show hands. You are investors. You don't have to worry about the money. Who wants to invest?
Not 10%, but yes.
Alright, sorry?
I would get more than 10%, but yes.
Okay. You agree, so you are in the same deal then. Yeah?
Another question.
Yeah?
Did they file the patents or did they have the patents?
They filed patents, so I think that means that they have them already, because otherwise it's pending. But they yeah. With proprietary knowledge. So the others are not willing to invest, I assume. Is there anyone who is in doubt, for example, is not really investing, but also not really not investing, or you are in doubt?
Yeah, I need to know a little more about the financials. I mean, it's a pretty high valuation. They want 300,000 for 10%. So if my math is right, they're valuing their company at $3 million.
That's correct, yeah.
So yeah, I just need to know a little bit more about why they're valuing it at $3 million.
Yeah. Obviously, we have a little piece of information right now where we have to decide on. So we have to make some assumptions. But if we have a look at the so these are some of the criteria. I'm not really sure if you can read them very well, but let's say let's try to get a more understanding of the proposition. So who can comment on what he liked or did not like? So what criteria scored well, what didn't score so well?
I like the team.
Why?
Because they came in using the product, which was motivating, and they were making fun together. And you had like nerd guy and like social guy. So I like the combination of the two of them. And I didn't understand what the nerd guy was talking about. And then they were talking about finance, which they could explain pretty good. So I think they have the capacities to run the stuff.
Yeah, so they have a really complementary team.
Yeah. If they would put in there like two nerd geeks, I wouldn't be as happy as I am.
Yeah. Okay, clear. Any other comments? Strengths, weaknesses, remarkable things?
They showed value for their properties because they had already ordered some. I don't remember how much, and they had already sold all of them.
100, yeah.
They had already sold all of them.
What does it mean for you?
Well, it means they showed that there is a market potential for it.
Yeah.
They can sell, apparently.
Yeah.
And so there's demand. They showed demand for the product.
Yeah.
Also, they sold it for like 5 times the cost.
Yeah.
They produced for like 350 and sold it for like 1,800. So that's
correct.
A really good profit margin.
Exactly. Yeah. So probably they add some value to the customers, right? They are willing to pay so much for the unicycle.
They have said that they have filed the patent, but I think I would wait till they get the patent because they are talking about another technology, and I think it could be possible that there could be a clash because we as an investor I don't really know what is the mechanism behind it, and whether they have used the same chip or not, whether they have used the same program or not. So I would rather
compared to, for example.
In the Segway, they have said that they have used the same technology. So, for example, I don't want it eventually to be a battle between Apple and Samsung over the same technology. So, I would rather wait for them to get the patent before I would invest.
So
in
your due diligence as an investor would be on the technology and the patent side, the legal side.
Yeah, because eventually I don't want something to shut down the company in which I have made some investment, right?
Yeah.
Just because a legal battle is lost, then my entire money would be lost.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, clear. Any other thoughts?
I think also that they already license out the product also makes an influence, because if you're an investor, you kind of want to also influence how the product is being licensed, how it's being sold.
Mm-hmm.
So if they already have one customer, then you're not the only source or the only person influencing it. So you already don't get full control, but only part of it.
Yeah, so because they had 2 license deals, right, or 1?
Oh, I think 1 so far.
Okay, okay, yeah. So at least you have 2 distribution channels. So one is directly to the end consumers, and the other one is via an e-bike manufacturer who licensed their technology. Which is in fact, of course, a very scalable revenue model, because you get rich while you are sleeping, right?
Yeah, that's also.
Yeah.
You have 2 products.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and both show some market adoption or demand. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Let's see. We have discussed the team, and execution a bit, growth potential, scalable business model. As a matter of fact, it's interesting to see that in the US they don't value the criterion the venture has international potential that high, because the US obviously has a very large internal market. But in the Netherlands and smaller markets, also Sweden, you'll see that the international growth potential is very important. I think market opportunity we've discussed, value proposition, more or less, market demand. Yeah, and the financials. You and I think you, right, or you said that the value was too high.
Oh yeah.
Or you didn't want to invest for 10%, or 10%, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
So the current valuation is 300,000 euros for a 10% stake, so 3 million.
No, it's not about that. Like, what I look at is what I would do. Obviously, I don't have like that amount of money right now, but first I look at the exit potential. If I can exit from this and I get my money in like and double, triple, 15, whatever, can I do that? I think I can do that in this case, because like it shows some like tension from some like big places, you know. So I think it could be an easy exit in this case, because it's technology, high stake, just sit next to the door. Yeah, you know where to find good investors, next to the exit. So
yeah.
So basically, what I would do is like first look at the exit. Yes, doable. And then second, they have the technology, they have the patent, they already overseas like have a factory is probably like a cheap labor and like some sort of like that kind of things, and like and they have like everything that you need for like a 21st century company right now. So
okay.
Why not? But I would say you're gonna use my network, my mentor, like my money. You know you need me. I know I need you to make money. So 10% no. But what about 40%?
40.
Yeah, and they're gonna say no. Don't. I'm gonna say then 50.
50?
Yes, and then they're going to say, okay.
So if they don't want 40, you go for 50?
Yes, and then they're going to say, oh, okay, 30. And I'll get my 30%, and we both going to be happy.
So you've already thought about your negotiations.
Yeah,
very
exactly.
Well. Shall we have a look at what the investors did, or does anyone has a comment? Let's go.
Incredibly impressive. You've definitely got something there. I bought the technology, but not at a $3 million value. I'm happy to offer you $300,000 for 33%. I will join Robert and take me to that offer. I just spent $5,000 ordering an electric bike. I think that market's going to be absolutely huge, and it doesn't have this technology in it.
Are there any other offers? Anyone else want to?
You're playing a very dangerous balancing act right now. You have 2 sharks interested when honestly I think we're all going to be out. I don't think you should waste much more time.
take the deal, but then for 33% equity share, which brings the valuation to 1 million. 1 million. So I think it's interesting to see what happened there, because there were 2 sharks interested. The rest, well, this guy said, I don't think the rest will be interested. But for some reason they agreed to lower their valuation from 3 million to 1 million. Can anyone maybe have an idea why they would go for the deal? I mean, it can be, of course, that they price themselves too high to have some negotiation power, but yeah.
Oh, so now you're talking from the perspective of the entrepreneur?
Of the entrepreneur, yes.
Okay, well, why they went for the deal? Well, I think they needed the financing. That could be one reason, saying we need the money, so I think giving up a little more of our company is worth it since we need the money.
So they were like in a weak position because they needed the money too bad.
Yeah, that could be one possibility.
Yeah, I agree. Could be the case.
Or maybe they were already anticipating on it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't really low at the beginning, so maybe they already knew that it would go up higher.
And meet in the middle or so. Yeah. Could be. Yeah.
Maybe your wife already bought an expensive vacation to Hawaii or something, so they needed the money.
Yeah, they were in like a desperate position.
Yeah,
could be.
sure.
Could be.
I think the geek had a wife bought.
Plausible.
Yeah.
Another reason could be that this investor, Kevin O'Leary, he is really good in making licensing deals. So that's maybe something that you didn't know before, but maybe they thought, well, if we have this investor on board, we are willing to have a lower price because he can help us very much with our licensing strategy, for example. And in that sense, we have a smaller piece of the pie, but the pie gets bigger. So that could also be maybe one of their thoughts. And I think we've already discussed all these criteria, but if we look at the main cluster, so there was an enthusiastic pitch, the team is obviously complementary, they have some proven sales. If you look at the growth, there's a royalty-based model and they have an online sales channel. The market opportunity, according to the investor, is going to be absolutely huge because he compared it to the e-bikes, and I think he also sees the potential there of licensing the technology to other e-bike manufacturers. The value proposition, well, they have already realized the sales, and we discussed the high margins, and according to the investor, it was incredibly impressive. So they have IP, proprietary knowledge, they partner with e-bike manufacturers. And for an investment opportunity, they didn't discuss the exit, so maybe it's they have something in mind already, but they did say that, we know that they have large margins and they have the royalty model. So that's more or less how we assess the venture propositions in a nutshell. Any questions on this? Because I think that was the final slide of the first part about investor readiness. So are there any questions about investor readiness or, let's say, investors? Because otherwise we're going to have a short break of, let's say, 10 minutes or so, quick break, and then continue with